Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Atari ST Show. It's our look at the underappreciated Atari ST computer, the series of computers made by our beloved Atari. Wake up, the Brent.
No, sorry.
It's time for the Atari ST Show.
I've been working the night shift.
Oh, that explains it. And dude, you're not the best worker either. So, how many digits you still got in your hands? This week we will be looking at night shift, but we thought before we got into the game night shift, we'd talk about our vast experience of working on the night shift.
It's amazing. We hate the morning.
I do. That's true.
And we both have extensive jobs that put us on the night shift. Aaron, do you want to start, or would you like me to start down the memory lane of night shift jobs?
Well, I will say, just to kick it off, because you said this sort of doesn't count. It sort of does. My first career was pizza delivery guy / pizza fixing guy / dishwasher. Almost all of that occurred at night. And in some to a certain degree would involve conveyor belts or tubing, stuff like that could go wrong. Or most of the time it was just like, am I going to run my car off a hill? Am I going to be shot? Stuff like that.
That was probably your most dangerous night shift job.
Yeah, I'd say it was. Yeah, I'd say that you mentioned it. Now, well, I don't know, the night watchman job. I also had a night watchman job that I got, and the night watchman job was twofold. Part of my job, I spent part of my night job, it was overnight. These were 12 hours, where you would walk around a townhouse development project, but they'd run out of money. And so the townhouses were built, but they weren't finished. No roads were made, and they had certain stuff in them, and people kept going and living in them or stealing ceiling fans out of them that were still in the box. So they hired me to walk around, and another guy, another big oaf, to walk around trying to look menacing. I remember distinctly I had one of those flat caps. I had a full-length leather jacket I wore, and I had a ball bat or a staff or a stick, and I used to smoke these big stogies. And I'd go out at night, and I did feel like Commander Stud. But then the second I heard any noise, I was like, ah! And then the other half of the night watchman job was taking care of a out-of-business old folks home. It was built beside some housing projects. People kept breaking in. And so no one would work the shit. They was too scared. But I'm not scared because I need money. I need money bad. And you got an extra couple bucks for working the night shift, so here I come. And I had to work that one out of town, so I'd sleep there during the day. So I was intimate with this old folks home. But I enjoyed it after a while. But I couldn't get into too much trouble there because there was no one there. In fact, no one ever tried to break in one time when I worked there, so that wasn't too bad. The main night shift type job I had was working at IBM and eventually Lexmark for 10 years on an assembly line. And this game reminded me quite a bit of that because you can have the wrong switch turned and stuff the conveyor belt can stop or go the wrong way, or stuff can be put in positions where it's not supposed to. We would send circuit boards through a machine that would put components on them. Mm-hmm. Then they would go to a table full of chicks. They would put components in them. Then they'd go through a wave solder machine. Then they'd come to me. I was the guy that would make sure that the cards worked, make sure that they weren't jacked up. And when they got to me, components would be in backwards. Components would be on the wrong side. The solder wouldn't work. Sometimes they just flat out put the wrong components in. Once we tested these cards and they were deemed worthy, then we'd send them to my shipping department. They also sucked. I remember one time the boss told me, he goes, listen, do you know you shipped $1 million worth of Sims and things that weren't supposed to have Sims? I was like, no, I didn't know. So the entire cell had to spend the whole weekend opening the boxes back up, pulling those things out, retesting every one. That was a screw up. That's the kind of stuff that happens. So this game hit close to home for me.
Yeah. Now, I also worked at Lexmark for a literal cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I was there for a 3-month stint where I didn't work a month of that 3-month stint. I was still in college at the time. It was a summer gig. And in the line that you're talking about, I was a pin checker.
Yes.
In
post solder, that's what that was called.
And if you're not familiar, it's literally when the machine puts on the components, you have to take a little stick and prod all the pins to make sure that they're soldered correctly.
All the ASICs.
And I remember distinctly, like, I was not liked in my cell. I wasn't in Aaron's cell.
He's not liked anywhere. No. Who are you kidding?
No. I mean, this was... I accept that I
suck.
Yes, a little bit, especially at this job. But my job was bonehead simple. Bonehead simple. It was literally take plastic stick, poke leg.
Yeah.
That's it. And a guy that was hired on at the same time as me was a card tester, which is also a bonehead job. You stick it on a machine and you hit a button and it tells you if everything works.
Yep, the Genrad.
So the tester guy got a lot of slack because he was slow, and so he got yelled. Well, I guess they really did. They yelled at people at that job a lot.
Yes.
So they kept yelling at him to go faster.
Yeah.
And so he had caught up, and he didn't have any more cards to check, right? And so he comes over to my station. He says, "Why aren't you sending these cards down?" And he grabs this stack of cards, and he walks off with them. And I'm like, "Stop! Don't!" Because all of those cards needed to go to repair.
Yeah.
So he was slapping them in the machine, and it was like 15 cards or something. And he was testing them all, and they were all testing bad. And he was getting pissed off, and the line was starting to back up because the good ones that should have been tested. So he got yelled at more, and he came back and yelled at me. I was like, "No, you took it. I didn't do anything." So I didn't last long at that job. Well, I mean, I went back to school. So.
You know, the problem with that, by the way, the tester we used was called a Genrad, and it was a clamshell. You put a card on it, you shut this thing, and it pushed pins up to test it on test points. There was, number one, the worst sound you could hear is when someone did that and all of a sudden the printer started. That meant it failed. If that printer kicked up, that was a failure. I hated that noise. Secondly, sometimes the guy working the tester would be in too big a hurry, and he wouldn't put the card on there right and just crunch and when he destroyed the card, it also destroyed the tester, and that's when we had to go get this uptime facilitator. That's what, in fact, there's one in here right now, Uncle Leroy. He was our uptime facilitator. They had to come and fix those pins and do wire wraps and stuff. It was nightmarish. But the job you did, the pin tester job, was in the post-solder area. It was an important job because those things would fail on the machine. When I first started, I had to run the rivet machine. And every night I did riveting, and I was riveting in my sleep. And you could screw rivets up real quick. So again, this game was right in our wheelhouse when it comes to this sort of work.
The very first station they had me on, I don't know if I'm sure you remember this. When cards would come out, it would be two cards attached to each other.
Yeah.
So you had to set them in this big guillotine cutter.
Yes, that was called the routers. What that's called, Brett.
So the very first time I was over there, I was like, do, and you can get in a rhythm, but it's so zone out. You know, it's a crap job. And I hit that button once and cut that thing at a 45-degree angle. And who was the dude with the big beard and the glasses?
Brillo?
Yes, Brillo. He walked over and he goes, "Huh, I don't think we can fix that one." and he held it up and he said, the other guy, I can't remember the other guy's name. He goes, "Hey, didn't you say we were a card over?" And he was like, "Yeah." He's like, boop. He just pitched it and that was it. Also, last story about your Lexmark. You had to, when you checked the card, you were supposed to initial it.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, man, if I put my initials on here, that's going to be bad news. So I was putting my name, right?
Oh, yeah, because your initials are B8.
Yeah. So I was putting my name on it, and they came back and said, "Hey, don't put your name. Put your initials." I was like, okay. So my initials are BAD. Yeah. So I was writing bad on all these cards and sending them down the line, and they're like, "Why are you marking all these cards bad?" I was like, "That's my initials." No. They said, "Listen, just mark it with your first initial and send it down the line." I was like, "Okay."
You know, I could tell a million Lexmark stories. I could that could be a whole show.
Let's not make it a whole show.
Since you mentioned the router, I will say just one thing. I ended up having a roommate that ran the router. I met him at a party one night in drag. He came to this party. He was a nice guy, but he's a huge pothead. Because you talked about being a zone-out guy. He would fall asleep in his car, smoking in the car. And he would always get White Castle after work. And he would fall asleep in his car with the car running. And I can't tell you how many mornings we'd get up, and he'd be in the car, passed out with the car running with White Castle burgers hanging out of his mouth. This happened over and over. Ultimately, this poor fellow, I remember it well, one of his last nights running the router, he was so zoned out, he cut some crap in half and then pooped himself at the router. That was in him. So, yeah, don't smoke that much dope, everyone. I don't suggest it.
And of course, just to round out the segment here,
round it out into that.
The other two jobs I had at night shift was, of course, I did IT work, which I had many an overnight shift, and my brief stint with the hospital as a CBT guy, with computer-based training guy. There is something. I mean, when you worked your night shift jobs, you had a balance. You had a lot of people or no people.
Yeah.
At the hospital job, I was in an office that was in a remodeled part of the hospital from like 10 p.m. to like 4 a.m. It was so creepy.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, 100 yards down the road, you see other people.
Yeah.
But where I was at, it was like in a little isolated pod. I was like, oh, God.
Yeah. How many horror movies have you seen going on for that setting there?
Exactly.
You know, none of this has a whole lot to do with today's show, but a little bit. Let's get into it. That was the love theme.
The love theme from Night Shaft.
That's right, Night Shaft. Well, I mean, that's a good name too, Brent. We're going to talk about the Atari ST version of the Lucasfilm Games classic, maybe Night Shift.
Well, it wasn't actually. It was made by a different company.
It was published by Lucasfilm Games,
Right.
but we'll get to it. So this is Night Shift from 1991. Developed by an outfit called Attention to Detail.
Great name.
I never heard of this company, and it's because they didn't do anything. As far as, at least the ST, it's the only game they did. And published, as we mentioned, by Lucasfilm Games. I mean, Lucasfilm, of course, it became, they changed their name from Lucasfilm Games, but they've done it all, including Loom, the Monkey Islands, the Zack Kraken's, their finest hours, everything, all this stuff on the Atari. So they had a good long run on the Atari. This game was a one-player game, and so the players thing, you could choose from one or two different players.
Characters.
Yeah, different characters in the game. This got a wide release, the brand.
Yes, it did.
This surprised me big time. So get this list. This was originally released, like I said, this came out in 1990, 1991 on the ST, also on the Amiga and the DOS platform, and the Commodore 64, and the Mac. And then eventually it rolled over to the ZX Spectrum and the Amstrad. So that's a wide variety of machines there. This was programmed by a fellow named John Steele. Cool name. His only other offering on the ST was Super Sprint. The graphical artist on this was Christopher Gibbs. He worked on Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis and Super Sprint on the Atari. And Akila Redmer is credited with the game design along with Christopher Gibbs. Get this will make sense to you. Keila Redner was responsible for Pipe Dreams and Pipe Mania. So in a weird way, those kind of dovetail into this game in an interesting way.
I suppose.
The music on this was done by Dave Lowe. He got Lowe. And this guy has done a million different games on the Atari, including Boat's favorite, Carrier Command, F-15 Strike Eagle 2, the Final Fight, a bunch of the Game Series, Games Summer Edition, Games Winter Edition, California Games 2, IK Plus. The list goes on and on. Just a ton of stuff. He also did sound effects on this one. And I should mention that this one was retailed at, I believe it was £24 99p.
So full
back
price
in the day, the full pricer. So just a little backstory before we get into the meat of the game. The developers, John Dean and Gibbs, Fred Gill, John Steele, Green, a few other guys, they had conceived this game as a game they were going to call Fix It. And it was supposed to be about a factory worker trying to keep a machine named the Beast from breaking down. And when they shopped this thing around, they met with Lucasfilm, then eventually LucasArts producers, who liked the idea of the game, but they thought it would be cooler if they implemented stuff from the Lucas family into the game, since they had a bunch of IPs they could use. And so that is how you ended up with the plot of the game effectively, which we'll get into. And they also thought it would be cool to add a second character to play, which in this case was the lady, to give the title a more girl appeal. And also, LucasArts suggested the name change from Fix It to Night Shift, which they thought was a good idea, and that's ultimately how that came about. So to me, it seems like that LucasArts there gave them some pretty decent suggestions. I don't think any of those suggestions are bad.
No, I think they're all good.
I think they're all a good idea. Yeah. So that's got to be unusual. They give good suggestions. So I asked the Brent if he'd looked into this game in terms of the backstory, and I looked at the manual for this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the manual. All right. When you get into this game, you get a book that has the basics in it, and then you get into they give you effectively what is a worker's manual for the game. The basics of the game are basics. Like, they don't give you much, and it's sort of built like you're entering a new job.
Mm-hmm.
And the job here is you're going to work for a company that you may recognize the company. Industrial Might and Logic is the name of the company, which is a parody of Industrial Light and Magic,
of course,
which was the special effects outfit for Lucas. You play either Fiona Fix It or Fred Fix It, and your job is to keep the Beast running. The Beast is the weird machine at Industrial Might and Logic that produces action figures.
Yes.
Okay. So in the game, you're producing the action figures for Lucas.
Yep.
Presumably for Kenner, who made the action figures, and you have to go around keeping the action figure machine functional, and then keep producing the correct action figures. That's the game, and then the manual treats it as such. It's like a manual you would get when you start a job. The secondary manual is really irritating, in fact, because one of the cute things they thought they'd do is that when they wrote the manual up, there's no E's in the manual, and there's a little note at the beginning that says the guy's typewriter was screwed up when he wrote the manual. There's a bunch of comments in the margins that are written in comments to try to give you some help. But this is not the kind of game where I told Brett beforehand, this isn't the game where I needed help, and I'm trying to scour through this manual that has no E's. It was killing me. I read that they thought it would be cool to have some Infocom-like additional manuals to this, and that's what they included. And it is, you can see there are coffee stains on the manual. Someone wrote in the number for a pizza place on the manual. There's stuff like that's cute. But, again, I would have liked some actual guidance because this game is not easy. Before we get into it, your thoughts on the opening and the fact that what do you think of the plot of this game as a plot for a game?
Well, if you watch the demo reel, it actually will subtly give you some hints on how to play the game. Basically,
Very subtle.
How to overcome some of the obstacles in the game. The plot overall, I think, is actually incredibly interesting. It is basic. You know, you're making different Star Wars characters, stormtroopers, Han, the Chewbacca, Darth
Zach
Vader.
McCracken's in there. The chick from Maniac Mansion's in there.
And it's a whole lot of, oh, I know what that is. Oh, which is cute. It's cute. It's a good addition to the game. It's far better than if you were just making generic figures.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Of course, you've got to make those figures, and that in itself is a trial. So when you start this game, okay. So I had a little trouble with this on the ST. I ended up getting I managed to play it, but I had to fill in some gas by fooling out the Amiga version.
Was yours crashing? I had mine continuously crash.
I just had it. Well, I'll be honest with you. I'm going to be straight up. When I first played this game on the Atari, it was so bizarre and hard. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought there was something wrong with the game. And so then once I went to another platform, I'm like, oh, nope, that's the game.
Well, I struggled through it for a while, but my ST emulator would crash, and it would crash, just freeze up. The whole thing would freeze up, and obviously that's not the game. Because the game should play fine. I'm going to stick that on something on the emulators going on.
Well, I will say this. I've got a package of the Mister that's had out pretty much every game we've ever played on this show, and it didn't include this game. So I had to go find it.
So it might be something.
And this game, I will say, was also incredibly underrepresented. I know why, and we'll explain why. But this game is not like when you're looking for like a full playthrough. Good luck. I mean, good luck finding anything. I had a heck of a time. So you can eventually start the game. Now, when you get to it, there's a menu you can go to that will allow you to select your control type or select a practice round. I found this out well into my gaming. And so you can practice the first level without time being on.
Don't do that.
No, I did do it eventually because it's a good way to get yourself around the factory. So let's talk about the game proper. The game takes place in a factory. And now it's not a conventional factory. It's a multi-floor factory that scrolls up and down on the screen, okay? And you jump around like a platformer to get up and down, with some exceptions, to get up and down the structure of the Beast. The Beast, again, is the computer, or is the machine that makes the action figures. The Beast has a ton of moving parts. It's got a ton of conveyor belts. It's got tons and tons of little platforms to jump on. It's got moving machinery. It's got conveyor belts that go straight up and down, left and right. It's got levers, and it's got other items that you can screw with. So when you first start the game, your guy goes into the office of the boss, and the boss says, okay, here is your assignment. Now, this is where you would put in, like, basically the level code. I think it's 4 fruit that you get, and if you screw with the fruit, because if you know what they are, you will change the different levels, or basically different assignments of what you want, and they'll be harder. But in the original one, he wants you to go out and make 5 Stormtrooper action figures.
Yes.
Okay? That's what he asked for. And then they turn you loose to the factory. That's all the preamble you get. Then you're on your own. The first thing I noticed right out of the gate on this game is that when there's something wrong in the factory, there's a real annoying alarm that goes off. And until you repair what's wrong, the alarm just keeps going off. So when you're first starting this game and you don't know what you're doing, you want to kill yourself.
Yeah, it's
the alarm, it can't stop. It won't stop. It non-stop. And since there's the availability of people, I've watched so many people try to play this game on YouTube that never even can turn off the alarm, and they just give up. And I would number myself amongst them early on, but I persevered to the point where I at least could talk about this game and have some clue what I'm saying. Now I will say, but I think we could agree with this. We are not experts at night shift. No. I'm not sure an expert exists, but it's not us. But we can give you our rough experiences with it. And let you go from here. Just before I ramble, when you first started up, and the very first time you loaded this game, and I know you didn't even look at the docs, like what did you think, and how did you handle yourself?
Well, yeah, because the very first thing Of course, as I've said many times before, I like to go into a game completely blind, no lookups beforehand, not even instruction book. I just want to pick up the game and see how well I do at it.
Boy.
And I did poorly.
Yeah.
I did incredibly poorly because you pick your character. That's all pretty self-explanatory. And then the boss will show you a screen of what you're making. And it says 5 stormtroopers. I didn't even know what the game was. So I was like, okay, there's 5 bad guys, is what I thought.
Boy, you were really into it.
Because I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
So I got into the level. I was like, okay, I need to find these bad guys. And that alarm is just going nuts the entire time.
Yeah.
So the very first thing I do is turn off the sound. So I kill the volume. And I'm seeing how the screen is laid out. And I think that it's a flip screen game.
Yeah.
So I start trying to go to the left or right, and there's a pit at the bottom. I fell in that pit a million times.
Yeah.
And you don't have lives in the game.
No.
You have time limits. You have to make your quota by X amount of time, and everything over that quota gives you money, which gives you points, unless you make them wrong, which gets you deductions. If you make the wrong configuration or the wrong figure or whatever. So I spent a large portion at the beginning of this game because I really wanted to figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
Dying.
Yeah.
And then I realized, okay, I can scroll up. So the platforms in this game are really bad. You can't, when you don't know, you can't tell what is a platform, what's not.
Yeah. They get better, but you have to experience them for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the background is so incredibly detailed. The workings of the machine.
Yeah.
So I climb up to the top. I'm like, okay, I didn't see any of these bad guys. I'm done. Let's go figure out how to play the game. So that was my very first experience.
Man, you may need to retool your approach.
No, I love it.
Because but you sat around, screwed around, and how long did that take?
Less than a half hour.
So I actually tried to look into it because I knew this was going to be. I looked at the box. I could tell this was something interesting. So the first thing I knew, I was like, okay, let's explore the beast. All right, now the way this works is. You've got an inventory of stuff, the tool belt, which the book goes into. Tool belt can hold stuff, and you go through it by holding. If you hit your button and pull down, you will move. The cursor will open up on your toolbox, and you can pick what you're going to be
left or right
in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into some of the stuff that you can pick. But the rest of it, jump. And so. You can jump around on the platform. Like Brent said, there are multiple platforms in this that are there. It takes some exploration because they look just exactly like something you can jump on, but you can't.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't. Like sometimes you can jump on machinery that's moving, and sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
And when you fall for a long distance, it doesn't kill you, but it dazes you long enough to where you're just costing you time.
And if you're on a conveyor belt, it just dumps you right in the bottom.
And just kind of like dying, just like Brent said, when you fall off the bottom, you just appear on the lowest echelon of girders and you're dazed. So that's the price you pay for falling too far or falling off the bottom. As you go up through this thing, you think what I would like to have seen, which would have helped the game, is some rhyme or reason as to how this thing works. Now, eventually, you can figure out sort of how it works.
Yeah.
Sort of. But I never fully understood everything, all the workings. So, I'm not going to lie. I failed over and over because there's a time limit. At the bottom of the screen is a candle. Then the candle burns down to nothing. That means the round's over, and then the boss takes inventory of how you did in the round. And so, and we'll get to that. So at first, I would just jump around, and I have no idea what to do. I was completely clueless. I finally found a couple playthroughs and looked at the book to try to get some. I just wanted a foothold. I spent hours, and I think I think what we're saying here is the problem with the game.
Yeah.
I spent hours, having no idea what I was doing. All right, and so eventually I saw, okay, here are some things I didn't know I could affect. Eventually in the first level you'll find out that near the top of the level there's a pipe that's leaking that you can fix. You go up to it, and when you have the appropriate tool lined up in your belt, if you hit the button and push up, your guy will turn around and it will do some sort of repair.
Yes.
Okay? And in this case, that alarm was going off because there was a broken pipe that needed to be mended with a wrench. Mended it with a wrench, and then to the left of that, there's a giant, like a beaker full of, like, assumably plastic that has a flame under it that's going. Okay, and underneath the flame, there's a button with a spring behind it. It's not obvious. Trust me.
It's really not.
And so this is something else I learned. When you see these sorts of things, you have to kick them.
Mm-hmm.
So then I spent forever trying to understand how to kick. And I can tell you right now, I can't tell you how to kick. I think it's a diagonal to up motion without any button. It's no button, but eventually your character will kick this button or these buttons, and then that will make the machine start.
Yeah.
Once that happens, keep in mind you're under a time limit. At the bottom of the screen when you came in, there's a bicycle. It's hooked up to a generator. And so you then have to go down and pedal the crap out of this thing to build up the electricity until these two lights are blinking about the same time to get building up energy to make these things go down. Then, by the way, keep in mind, this is the opening level, okay? I have had something happen to me multiple times. It only happens sometimes, but sometimes something gets out of sync and the stormtroopers have the heads under the feet.
Yeah.
And so then you've got to go up and kind of like go up to one of the handles and temporarily stop one of the conveyor belts to let things line back up to where the handle, and then turn the handle back on where the head lands on the shoulders. And ultimately, if you do all this on the first level, these finished, off-color granted, but finished stormtroopers will fall all the way down in this like inventory bucket.
Box, yeah.
And then will be processed. And then when the candle finally extinguishes, you'll be led into the office, and then he will take an inventory of what you did. Now, here's the funny thing. The first, 25 times I tried this level, I never got it right.
Yeah.
And a couple times I would get to the point where I could get 3 or 4. When I finally got this right, I got 17 stormtroopers. And I was like, okay, I've got this licked. The downside of this is, no matter how good you get at the game, you've still got to negotiate your way up to the top of this thing. And it is not...
It's a puzzle. It's a platform puzzling nightmare.
You get used to it. And eventually I got so good at the first level, it was no problem.
Well, and it's the same machine every time.
Yeah. So
you do learn.
Yeah. So once you get up there, you're okay. But that's the first level. Your experiences on that level, was it about the same?
Oh, it was. A few things that need to be noted is the game starts you off as slow as it can.
Yeah.
It's not like they jack up the difficulty to the moon. It's because of the learning curve. In actuality, on the first level of the game, all you have to do 90% of the time is ride the bike to power the machine, jump up to the very top, fix the steam valve, turn the machine on. That's it.
Kick it. Yeah.
Turn the
Unless
machine
it gets
on.
out of sync. And the funny thing is, you can actually not use the bike until you've done the other things. And that's what I did every time to get the big points.
I always start on the bike because that way the machine starts sooner. But so...
It actually doesn't. It's actually quicker the other way.
I don't agree.
I promise you.
Anyway, so those are all you have to do, ride the bike, close the steam valve, turn on the machine. That sounds incredibly easy, but it's incredibly, incredibly challenging.
At first.
Right.
Yeah.
To figure out, to get to the point where you know what's going on. So, how the game actually adds in difficulty is it begins to give you more challenges and more things to do.
Yeah.
On the first level, all you have to do is complete 5 stormtroopers. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter how many you get of a certain color or anything like that.
As long as they're one solid color. Yeah.
5 of them.
Yeah.
So the next level adds in
You have to have, I think it's 5 Zach McCrackens and 2 of the chick from, or 3 of the chick from Maniac Mansion.
You're making 2 different figures. So, but the
machine does it.
Yeah, the base of it is still the same. You might have to shift a conveyor belt to go left or right, and that's what the levers are doing.
Yeah.
But it's still just a small step above where you were before. Level 3 is the first level that adds in enemies.
Right. Well, level 2. let's backtrack it, because the step up from level 1 to level 2 is pretty high, in my opinion. We should talk about what the tools are and what they do before we move on, because they can become important. We mentioned the wrench. These are the things you can store in your toolbox.
Close the valves.
You can also get a balloon that you can open up out of your tool valve, and it will just lift you as high as you want to go on the level.
Yeah.
And there's an umbrella that will take you down. It's the opposite of that. So those two are pretty simple.
It's a fast way to get up and down the machine.
Then you've got a vacuum cleaner that you can suck up a little animal in.
One of the bad guys.
Then the other one is a Venus flytrap you can drop down.
That eats another type of rodent.
And then you've also got the matchstick. So that's the matchstick comes in on the second level.
That's the second one, yeah.
There's at the very start of the level, there's a furnace. And then there's also, right
at the very top.
No. There's a furnace right beside the bike. Then there's also another flame underneath the beaker.
Yes.
So on this level, on the second level, you've got to light the furnace at the bottom, light the beaker furnace, kick the button, also fix that same pipe.
The valve.
And then you've got to charge. There's no electricity. You've got to charge electricity. And once you do all that, then the conveyor belts start working, but they're also configured to throw the figurines in the garbage. So you've got to go up and configure it's, by the way, I can say this with confidence because I did it so many times. You've got to turn the conveyor to where they're not going in the garbage. And then they eventually, if you get lucky and they come down in the right way, you can finish this level. I finished this level eventually a few times, again, what often haunted me after doing all that other stuff was the fact that sometimes I would get 2 heads in a row, or it's because you've got a conveyor belt wrong, and the beeping doesn't necessarily stop for that. If you've got a beaker not lit, a furnace not lit, a pipe leaking,
something actually wrong with the machine.
But if you're just throwing stuff in the garbage, it doesn't care. It won't stop beep. It won't start beeping. Yeah, and once you get to that level where you get the Zach McCrackens and the Chick from Maniac Mansions in, you can get off that level. Then you go to the third level. Now, did you saw the cut screen?
Yeah.
In between, I guess every 2 levels, I can't tell you for sure.
I don't know. I never got off 3.
Fix it. We'll go home, and his house looks like a dump. And he gets out in front of his house and he waves at you. So I'm going to assume that eventually you'll make enough money to fix his house up.
Yeah.
But which I think's cute. I like that idea. And you do, when you go in after your shift's over, the boss, you get more money if you do more work.
Right.
As long as you get the minimum.
Above quota.
If you come one guy, if you get 10 Zach McCrackens, but only 2 of the Chick from Maniac Mansions instead of 3, you're fired. Yeah. He has no pity on you. Go ahead with 3.
So they add in rodents. And
yes, these little scumbags.
There's 2 types of rodents. I never saw the second one. I never got off level 3. But what this guy does is he will jump around the machine, and there's a chance that he will hit a lever. Yes. And that will cause the conveyor belts to start going the other way. And you might never even notice, right, until stuff starts getting crapped up. And he'll attach to your leg and slow you down. So it kills your walking speed. If he attaches to you, you can just kick him off. But the only way to eliminate him is to get one of the Venus flytraps, put it on the ground, and him going into it.
I'm pretty sure that I think there's 2 rodents, like there's a chick one and a boy one.
Yeah.
And I think one of them uses the vacuum cleaner, you can get rid of them, and the other one used to be a spot. But I don't know if they're interchangeable because I was panicked the entire time.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm on level 3.
And here's the other thing. They don't just give you the items. And the items are of limited use. Yeah. You have to run around the board and pick up the items to use later. Now, the one nice thing is it does look like it saves it from level to level. I never ran out of an item, but there were times when I didn't have a Venus flytrap, and I had to find one.
Yeah, that's And they'll as far as I could tell, they randomly appear around the level because you could get them on level 1.
Yes.
I've got them a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And in level 3, those rodents suck.
Yes.
And the hardest part of this game, to me, is the conveyors. And the thing is, what makes them hard is it's hard to explain how the pattern of where they go. Did you have that?
Yeah, no, it was all gobbledygook most of the time.
And you can also get the point where you have to hit screws and stuff. And I didn't get that far, but I mean the conveyor belts. Until you understand exactly how the beast works, these are going to be a problem. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. So here's my analysis of the game as a whole. This would probably be an awesome game on any of the platforms. Although one thing I want to note, some of the different platforms like DOS and Commodore, they do not have a pit at the bottom. The machine is virtually the same, but there's no death pit at the bottom. There shouldn't be a death pit. It's just it
doesn't kill you.
Well, it takes up time. It's an added difficulty that doesn't need to be there. Anyway, if they would have started off and the beast was a small machine, just one screen of what you were on, and all you had to do was pedal the bike and maybe fix one wrench, right?
Yeah.
And that was level 1. And then level 2, have it so the beast grows a little bit. And there's a new tool that you have to use or a new thing. And then if it grows a little bit more and maybe a mouse hole is at the top, right? So the rodents actually are coming from somewhere instead of just randomly appearing. I think if they would have done that and had a true progressive learning curve to get through this game, it would have been an absolute banger of a game. But since it starts you in the middle of the learning curve and the way they have it set up, there's no way to make that better. There's nothing they can do because on the very first level, you only have to do 3 things and you'll probably beat the level. They can't make it any easier because of the way the game is designed. And that is a huge detriment to the game. I would love this if it wasn't so hard off the beginning and so frustrating. As it is, I can't recommend it just because I don't want people to be ripping their hair out.
I think what they should have done was this. A lot of people hate tutorial levels, and I'm not saying that, but I think they should have 10 tutorial sections, just levels, okay? On the first one, all you do is get on the bike, run the bike.
Yeah.
Second one, go up here, tighten the bolt, and make the smoke go away. Here's where you kick the thing. Or maybe you could kick the thing and learn how to light the thing. Okay, here's how the rodents work. Here's how the conveyor belts work. And what I would like to see is a spelled out path. Here's the path that the various figures go as they're constructed.
Maybe like a power up that you get, like a pair of glasses that if it was on your belt and you hit your button, it would show with arrows the path because
it's memorizable if you sit there.
Oh my God, it would be so hard.
I mean, I got to the point where listen, this is one of those games that you have to sit. This ain't one you sit down and play for like 10 minutes and be like, you've got to sit and play this for hours and hours.
Yes.
But I mean, I will say, when I cashed out all those stormtroopers, I felt like $1 million.
Yes.
I was like, okay, I really accomplished it. I earned that one. And there's a lot to it. Plus, the Star Wars tie-in's fun because you got all the Lucas stuff. They've got. Think about it. It's funny. This is a side story, but it's sort of pertinent. My kid's jiu-jitsu teacher is writing a book on his uncle. His uncle. One of the things his uncle did was work for Kenner Toys for many years in Cincinnati, and he actually gave my kid's instructor some prototype figures and stuff from back in the day, and he was talking to me about it. And it turns out that the wife of one of my best friends, and she's a good friend of mine too, her father worked at Kenner because they lived in Cincinnati. So here's another guy that worked at Kenner. In case you don't know, Kenner Toys, they're the ones that actually made all the Star Wars figures in the 70s and 80s. They were the big dog. They made all the figures. So play a game where you make action figures. I think it's cute. I like the idea. So that integration, top shelf. But what failed in this game is the learning curve because you're right. The first level isn't hard, as long as but it's incredibly hard all at the same time. It shouldn't be like that.
Right.
They've got a practice mode that you can, and which that helped me quite a bit. The menu system just isn't great either. You have to hit a button to get the menu system to come up, but once you sit around and go and just run around the level, you can at least have a decent idea of what's happening. But even still, I never got to the point where you were painting the figures. I don't know how to adjust the paint.
Well, on the third level, you actually have to start adding color.
Right.
And there's 3 colors, and you can mix different colors. That's when the game gets...
I failed before I could even toy with that stuff on the third level. Third level. So... You're right. This game, I was scared of it, real scared.
I'm still scared of it.
Yeah. But for the right person, this is a brilliant game.
Yes.
You can see why Lucas wanted in on it. You could see why these guys were excited about it. But on the flip side, you could absolutely see why this is a game I've never heard of until this week.
Yep.
I never heard of Night Shift. And the fact that Lucas was involved, you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
I've heard of almost every game they ever made, but I never heard of this one. Well, there's a reason. Why is there so little footage of this being played on YouTube? There's a reason. Because whoever does the deed is going to have to sit down. They're going to be all man, and they're going to have to sit down and play with this game.
And map it.
Something else that doesn't help this game. We haven't talked about the controls that much. The controls are a little loopy, and the reason is you don't ever want to pull down and hit the button, despite that being a natural inclination sometimes. The jumping in this is okay, but often when you're trying to do something, you'll accidentally hit up and jump, and instead of jumping, he'll turn around and try to work on something.
Yeah.
And it screws up your flow, something fierce. This game desperately needs one extra button. Would have been great. One extra button, or maybe 2, maybe 1 to bring up the inventory. But if you just had 2, you'd be in business. 1 to jump, 1 to bring up the inventory. Would have been fine. The system they got in there now is adequate, but it's not
barely.
It's not perfect.
Yeah, just
and in
barely.
this game, I can tell you right now, as hard as this game is, we haven't talked about just the general difficulty of the platforming that much. It's not about that you can't see some areas, because the graphics is top shelf, I think.
Absolutely.
But the problem is, there's nothing more frustrating because you don't get a lot of time in this either. The time's tight. And so when you fall too far and then you fall down on something like a treadmill that knocks you back down the level like a lot, it is so frustrating.
It's demoralizing.
Especially when it happened because you accidentally worked on something instead of jumped.
Yeah.
That sucks. So that is one aspect of the game that desperately could use another button. It's funny, this is a game that has a button for jump. Normally I'd be happy with that. And the thing is, the way it's set up, you can't have up for jump in this because you have to, I guess they could have made the button be the thing that made you work on something, but that doesn't seem as natural as the way it is. So that's a problem too. But the sound, music, the graphics, the plot, there's a lot to be happy with here.
Yeah.
I was interested, Brent, to see how this would have reviewed. So I actually found some reviews on this. ST Action gave this an 85%, so, that's a B. ST Format gave this an 86%, same thing. ASM gave this a 73%. Atari ST User gave it a 47%. They weren't as fond of it, so clearly there was something there. I just kind of looked at the general inclination of people towards this game, and again, it's not like there were a lot of people clamoring to talk about it, so I don't know if it's just something that no one really was into, or it just didn't sell that well. I didn't see anything about sales figures, but that's not unusual.
I think being a puzzle platformer in and of itself is a difficult sell. And then when you have one that's this confusing right off the bat, it's even that much harder.
It does have, to me, it absolutely had that one more try. I will say another thing I didn't like. If you were to hit escape, it would let you restart, but when you restarted, you had to completely restart the going into the boss cutscene, the getting the job cutscene. I just want to restart the level instantly. That's what I want. In a game like this, that's what it should do. So that's another aspect. We got one review from the Intrepid Review Machine. Pajako chimes in. Night Shift has got to be one of the most awesome-looking retro games I've ever seen. Everything is lovingly animated, and the beast has moving parts everywhere, and it's fascinating to look at. By the way, this reminded me so much of Nick Morente's game that we reviewed on the Coco, where you're inside that giant machine. There's a lot of similarities between that. Anyway, Pajako continues. And conceptually, this game should be awesome as well, but it's really difficult to figure out what's going on. And although that can be part of the fun with games like this, in this case, the game gives you nothing much back, and a lot of it's trial and error. Even reading the instructions didn't yield any real clarity. Thankfully, there's a demo mode to help a bit. The game is also made more tricky with platform design, as it isn't always obvious where you can jump or walk on, and so, again, more trial and error. Thankfully, you can't die. I love the little nods to other LucasArts franchises and games and the overall look of the game. Audio is pretty good, and I will go ahead and say I genuinely think the ST version is better looking and sounding than the Amiga version. I played them both, and I could see that. To me, the game is more complex than it needs to be, and feels like the designers didn't know where to stop adding great ideas in. I really wanted to like this game, but it is so unforgiving that I don't know if I want to stick more time into it. Great looking, great sounding, but too tricky to get to grips with easily. 6.5 out of 10. 6.5 out of 10 from Pajako is like a 2.
Yeah.
That's one of the lowest scores that Pajako's ever entered in the history of the show. So there you go with that. This one, I recommend this game, and I'm going to tell you why. With a caveat, okay? And the caveat is you have to promise yourself that you will take the time to invest in the game to enjoy it. This is a game that you invest 2 hours of your time per game session, and I think you can have a lot of fun. Now, as you get to the later levels where there's a lot more going on, it may, because we should also call out the time limit on this too quick. On these early levels, they've got to give you some time, just because you don't know what you're doing. But I will say, once I got good at the first level, the time felt like it lasted forever. But when I was bad at it, it felt like it went quickly. Yeah. So I guess that's a good game design. But I really do. I think this is a good game. And I think it could be a lot of fun if you are in the right mindset. So I'm going to give it the thumbs up. I definitely think it's a top shelf title. Giving this a letter grade, it's hard. It is. It's just hard because it's so difficult, and some of it some self-inflicted wounds, and granted, but it's also so incredibly unique. Yeah, I don't think I've ever played a game quite like it. I've seen games try to do this sort of thing, like Sleepwalk on the Amiga. This sort of reminds me of that in a weird way, but this is way, way better. I didn't like it at all. But I think this is a pretty good one if you feel like you can invest the time on it. For me, my time is so precious to Brent that I can't still have the time to invest it. So that was fun. I had a good time playing that one. Brent, do you want to talk about what's next in the retro rotation coming up next week?
Oh God, coming up next week is the non-Nokia phone thing majigger.
I threw that to you because I knew when games that play on the Nokia operating system that aren't Nokia games. We'll come up with a better title than that. Let me tell you something. As scared as I was of this game, I can't tell you how petrified I am. Whatever the heck we're doing on ARG
now it's time to do it in real life.
Tune in for the failure and the scaring and the clenching of teeth. It should be a lot of fun. Let's talk about our next game on the Atari ST Show. This one doesn't even have a box, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. It's Rod versus KFC. Have you ever heard of this? The Brent. This was from the selection committee. They demanded that we play this game, and I don't know. I know that it uses assets from other games. That's all I can tell you on this one. We'll be back with Rod versus KFC on May 25th. So there you go. That should be another one. You know, the Atari ST games, every week is an adventure. I mean, because this game here,
painful adventure.
You know, the funny thing is, now you've been on the ST Show now for over a year, I believe, and we've been doing this for quite a while.
Several years, Aaron. Go ahead.
On the ST Show?
Yes.
Gosh, it's been that long. Anyways, this game we just played.
Yeah.
Was on so many computers.
Yeah.
Right? This is one of the good things about the ST Show. This is probably going to be buried on every one of those other machines. You're never going to hear about it. But the ST, the pickings are a lot slimmer. So you're going to get these oddball titles. Now, sometimes it's good. Like this week. Next week, Rod versus KFC.
Not next week.
You know, or whatever. Next show. Who knows how that one's going to be. You know, we could have another crap man on our hands. You know, you never know what you're going to get when it comes to that. So please join us next week for that. Now,
next show.
I'll never get used to it. Do you have anything was there anything we need to tell the Atari ST audience here if we take this to the house? You always a man of wisdom, such as yourself. You always got a lot to say. What do you have to say to our fine Atari folks?
Nope.
I will say something then. Thank you for your patronage. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us live. And thank you for supporting the Retro Rotation and allowing us to bring you such stone cold classics as Rod versus KFC and Crap Man and all the others. We appreciate you. That's all we got, everybody. Until then, make sure you play
your ST today.
Close.